I think it's the sign of a good journalist who says, maybe that wasn't the right decision. I haven't made many of those, but this was a case where I did. And I think transparency and honesty is, is a really great exercise for all journalists because let's face it, we're not perfect and we don't get it right 100% of the time.
Welcome to On Brand with Donny Deutsch. I am Donny Deutsch, and this is a podcast dedicated to a simple premise that everybody and everything today is a brand. Every religion, every athlete, every celebrity, every corporation, every person, everything today, as we say, is a brand. And we do a couple of things on this show. What we do is we go through a big interview with a big personality about their own personal brand. And this week we've got Katie Couric talking about her book and a lot of other stuff. Everybody knows Katie, household word. She's an old friend of mine. We're going to chat and have a lot of fun. And we also do what we call our brands of the week here, which is basically the brands that are setting the zeitgeist, who's up, who's down, who's kind of setting the table about where we're going as a country. And in order to do that, as most weeks, we have one of my my partner in crime, the great Emily Jane Fox, senior correspondent for Vanity Fair magazine, New York Times best-selling author, Born Rich, the story of the Trump family. You can catch her all over Vanity Fair. She's a happy mother, and she's one of the smartest folks around. Welcome, Emily Jane.
Ugh, I love this. And I love being your singular partner in crime.
Yes. Let's get right to it. First up, brand down for Biden versus Trump in 2024. Nobody wants to see that show. 70% of Democrats do not want to see Biden run, and 60% of Republicans do not want to see Trump run. And the reason for a big part of the reason on both is their age. I mean, if you really think about it, Biden would be 82 if he ran again, which means he'd be serving till 86. And Trump would be, I think, 79 or 80, serving till 84. Either way, I agree. Both too old to run the country. I don't mean to be ageist. Forget their politics and forget Trump for the obvious reasons. I don't disagree with the poll out there. That's from a Harvard-Harris poll.
Yeah, I think that they're both too old in age. And also, it just reminds me of an era that I want to get out of.
Yeah.
I don't want to relive the last 6 years. They were not a pleasant 6 years to live through, and I think they represent a moment in time that was unpleasant. And I think that there's a little bit of a new way forward. I don't know how we get there because I think we are stuck in this minority ruling the majority.
Yeah.
But I think that both of them do not represent an America that we want to exist in tomorrow.
I hear you. What you got?
Okay. In that same vein, I have a brand down for America. And I know that sounds like a 30,000-foot view.
Coming from a millennial woman, I'm not surprised to hear that.
Okay. I don't know.
And I don't mean that in a patronizing way. I mean, I hear you, but I'm particularly not surprised to hear about it from somebody from your demographic.
I've been talking about this for the last few weeks in my house a lot, and I just feel like America's over. I feel like the experiment of America was fantastic for a certain group of people for 200 and something years, and now it is terrible for just about everybody. And it used to be the land of opportunity. It used to be the land of economic promise. It used to be the land of freedom. The place where anyone who was seeking the freedom to be who they were and the chance to come here and make it because of how hard they work and of what they have inside of them for everybody around the world. And now I don't feel like that's true. I don't think that you could make a living wage in this country. I don't think that we have the kind of economic, social freedom that this is promised to us. And I don't see a way of getting back there. I think that we are too far gone, and it is depressing to say, but I don't feel like we are going to get back to the America that was once promised to us ever again.
As Winston Churchill said, it's the worst, I'm going to misquote him, but the best form of the worst of governments. In other words, it's still democracy. And look, we're the longest running experiment, and nobody, as we all know, and we've talked a lot about on this program, that there's no guarantee that our democracy as we know it are going to continue. So if you start right there and you start what's going on, what Trump tried to do, you start the state legislatures, what's being set up for 2024, that alone, and obviously we saw Roe v. Wade, guns, January 6th, and you go, and the polarization and the we are divided, and so in so many ways we are going backwards. We are not what we were. Having said that, and I don't know if this is just who I am, I'm still a believer. I still believe that we're in a moment in time. We're in a really, really bad moment in time. I do believe that leaders emerge. I don't think it's any of the ones that we see right now. And I don't want to say I'm hopeful, but I'm not ready to throw in the towel.
Well, here's why I think you feel that way, because America works for you right now,
Yeah.
right? None of your rights have been taken away.
You're right.
You are very privileged in a million different ways. And
You're
so I
100%
feel like
right.
you have the ability to have hope because your world has been untouched as of yet. And I have had that privilege for 30 something years of my life. And now I feel like in the last year since I became a mother and have been touring schools for my child, and I think about, do they have an armed guard out front? What is the security protocol for my daughter who just turned 1 year old when she goes to school next year as a 2-year-old? That I have to think about this is
Yeah.
sickening.
Yeah.
And the fact that my rights as a woman and as a mother and my daughter's rights when she is old enough are hanging in the balance. I don't feel that way anymore. I don't have hope anymore. And I have asked the question more times than not over the last few weeks, where else could we live? And that's a scary thing. And I understand there's privilege in me being able to ask that, right?
Yeah.
But it's
no,
a crazy thing.
you're not alone. And they have these I forgot what it's called, these no gold visas where you can basically pay for, once again, the privilege win. You can pay 10 grand and get a citizenship in Portugal or some, which seems to be one of the hot places. Well, to be continued, obviously a big discussion.
Can you give me some uplifting brands here?
I'll give you, I don't know if uplift, a brand up really smart for Gavin Newsom. He took out an ad recently, last few days ago, kind of an anti-DeSantis ad. And it was kind of California versus Florida. And it was all what we were just talking about, that we're losing our freedoms, that in Florida, people are losing the right to certain books in school, obviously women's reproductive rights, all the stuff, all the bad stuff, the guns. And what's so brilliant about it is he's setting him up as he's really like, okay, if DeSantis is the future, I'm going to go against the Republican future and be the Democratic future. It's just branding 101. Really, really, really smart. Just skipping over Trump and going, this is the next guy in line, whether it's this year or 4 years from now. And I'm going to set myself, vis-a-vis, me versus him. Well, that puts me as the next guy in line.
It's fascinating because, not that long ago, he was recalled
in
California. And so he's sort of, not only is he skipping over Trump, he's skipping over his state where he's
How is he doing? What
are
people feeling about it in California?
I think people loathe him in California.
Why do they loathe him?
And I think he was in the pandemic, had all these crazy rules, and then was out
in San Francisco. Right.
Yeah. So I think that there are a number of reasons. I also think the state of the state is not great.
Yeah.
And so I think that there are a number of reasons why people don't like him, but they really don't like him. And so there's a real chutzpah to him going and being a national politician. But
smart move.
Chutzpah,
smart move.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, whether he's the guy, whether he's got the chops, whether it's legitimate, it's a smart strategic marketing move.
Yes. I have a brand down that's a total left turn.
Shoot.
But I feel like you and I have to talk about this. Traveling in this country, in this world, is wild right now. Have you seen what's happening in airports around the world?
I heard
honestly?
about it. You just came back from Italy. What's going on?
I just came back from Italy, and we were mostly spared, except for on our way out. There was a strike at the Paris airport, and we were connecting through the Paris airport.
There was a strike at the Paris airport, right?
Yeah, and I think there have been, over the last couple of weeks, have been a number of strikes at the Paris airport and airports around the world. And it sent us into a scramble for a couple of days, and it ended up being fine. But I think I've seen many people, their bags and bags and bags, hundreds of bags in the airport. Every flight is delayed. My parents
Every flight's delayed. Bags are lost.
My parents were coming to visit our daughter. Their flight just got canceled that morning. There were no other flights. It's crazy.
It's crazy. It really is.
So the airlines, there are not enough pilots. It's going to take a very long time to train them. It seems like a crazy time.
It is. No, I'm hearing that from everybody. I'm going to give you an equally kind of, well, not equally, but just what we were talking about before, a brand down for reality. Here's a great one. 68% of Fox News viewers, that's practically 7 in 10, think that January 6th, they blame it on left-wing protesters trying to make Trump look bad. That's 3/4 of their viewing audience Forget that they say whether Trump's a liar or not, but what they've been watching, the same video that everybody's seen, and of course Fox doesn't play it as much, actually really have bought into that 3/4 of the people watching Fox knew that those were all really lefties in there doing that, causing that.
Yeah, because they've drank the Kool-Aid that they've been watching for the last, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years, and probably even before that. They have been watching an alternate reality, and it's just like a cult. You're brainwashed. You're able to believe a completely different worldview because you've been fed that for a very long time. It's not surprising to me, but this is honestly why I feel like this country has gone in a direction where you can't go back. You can't then convince these people who have been convinced of something and truly believe it. You can't even be mad at them. You feel sorry because they've just been indoctrinated and they've been completely brainwashed to believe a very weird, very disturbing worldview.
Well, I'm going to give you a brand up that's going to make you feel better. The song Memory from Cats. Have you heard about this and why it's in the news?
Yeah. No, but I love that song.
I love that song. You maybe not love it. Okay. In Stephanie Grisham's new book, she claims that Trump's staff would play the song Memory from Broadway musical to soothe the former president when he was stressed, it was revealed. So that when Trump was starting to have meltdowns, they would bring in various show tunes, but particularly this one would calm him down. Literally, they would say, Grisham recently published a tell-all book that noted when Trump descended into turmoil, his staff resorted to summoning a nicknamed the Music Man to play songs from musical they knew would soothe him, namely Memory from Broadway.
This is hysterical. This is the only funny thing I've heard in like months. This is maybe my favorite thing that's ever come out of the Trump White House, and probably the only thing that's made me like Trump in like a really, really long time. This is very,
you sometimes
very
have to play, like act it out. Picture this. He's like throwing stuff against the wall. He's,
I can picture it.
And all of a sudden, Memory.
Also, this makes him seem so old, to your first point about him being too old. Like, nothing has made me think he's too old to be president more than him needing show tunes to calm down. It really feels like Hour at the old age home.
What else you got for me?
Have you seen at all anything about Daily Harvest? Do you know what Daily Harvest is?
I heard people are getting their organs replaced.
It's
just, what's going on with that?
Okay, so Daily Harvest is this
is obviously
frozen,
big brand down.
Yeah,
okay.
Like the biggest. It's this like frozen
ready-to-make meals,
delivery.
healthy.
Yeah,
right.
You can get smoothies, you can get bowls,
right.
You can get flatbreads, whatever. So
right.
they have these like lentil crumbles. I don't know how to describe them. I've never had them. But from what I gleaned, they're like these little crumbles that come frozen. And Daily Harvest is a brand that advertises on Instagram a lot and relies heavily on influencer marketing. And so all these influencers were hawking this shit. And apparently these crumbles were contaminated in some way, and people who had them are like violently ill. They have their liver enzymes are through the roof, and the company, I think, was downplaying it at the beginning and is now starting to have to explain the gravity of the situation. They've obviously told people that if you have these, throw them away, do not eat them. But it kind of shows a little bit the danger of influencer marketing and all these people selling to millions and millions and millions of people.
You better know what you're getting in bed with. Yeah,
totally. Crazy.
Okay, I got a good one for you.
Okay.
Frasier's coming back. Series revival brand up this fall. Kelsey Grammer has updated the status of Frasier. Paramount Plus, where Kramer will answer the call for a third time as former Seattle radio psychiatrist Dr. Frasier Crane. Now, does that tell you that we're just out of good ideas that they keep recycling, or is it like, why not?
Well, we've definitely reached peak reboot culture, and I think that Frasier being rebooted shows me that we maybe are scraping the bottom of the barrel. But people love that show. I don't know that I've watched a reboot that I've liked so far. But I don't know. We're in a nostalgia era
right now. Is Maverick, Top Gun? I mean,
that's true.
Have you seen it
yet? I didn't see it. I have not seen it. My husband saw it. He loved it.
It's great.
I'm not totally in the audience for it, but yes, actually, that's a great example of a successful reboot. All the other ones I've watched haven't totally been for me, but we're in such nostalgia culture right now. Everything from the 2000s is coming back. The 90s is
when
coming
nostalgia comes back, when the current time is not good, that's when people they long for a better time.
Frasier feels like a cozy show.
This is going to cheer you up a little bit.
Ooh.
Taco Bell's newest food uses an oversized Cheez-It. So basically what they're doing, a massive Cheez-It, which is 16 times the standard size, serves as the base for Taco Bell's Big Cheese Tostita. The meal layers ground beef, sour cream, tomatoes, lettuce, and cheddar cheese on the big cheesy cracker for $2.49. Now, this is coming off their success of their Doritos taco. Did you know that they have a taco that's made of Doritos? So the entire taco.
I did know that.
So now they're doing it. How do you know it? Don't tell me your husband eats it.
He loves Taco Bell. He's not had the. Actually,
full disclosure:
he has not had,
Taco Bell is a Deutsch LA advertising agency client.
Okay,
so
well,
full
great,
disclosure.
because this household is a huge client of yours. My husband, he actually hasn't had it in a very long time, but he loves Taco Bell. So
what is his order of choice?
I don't know. I don't partake in it. I don't want to know about it. But me living in this house, there's a lot of Taco Bell. And I will tell you, for his a birthday 2 years ago or 3 years, I don't know what it was, I had planned to take him and some friends to the Taco Bell headquarters here in California. Amazing. To do a private Taco Bell thing. And then the pandemic happened, and his birthday was like the early days of the pandemic, so we had to cancel.
Man.
We're real Taco Bell heads over here.
Give Lee the thumbs up on that one. What else you got for me?
So disgusting. Okay. I have a brand up for science.
Okay.
I just think my daughter, who is a year old, just got vaccinated for the first time, her first COVID vaccine last week.
Right.
And it's just the coolest thing. There was no vaccine for this very complicated virus 3 years ago, and now you are working your way down from the elderly to adults in this country to teens to kids, and now babies who are 6 months and older can get this vaccine and be protected against something that they weren't protected against. And I know this is a very earnest thing to say, but what a cool thing that we have been able to identify a vaccine that doesn't really cause side effects in anybody and has really protected people from serious illness in such a short amount of time.
Let's bring it back to politics. Ted Cruz is going after Elmo. Did you hear this one? They showed Elmo getting vaccinated on the air, obviously to show the kids, and he was like, Elmo went after Elmo. Like, I mean, how can we do this? It's just amazing.
I take all of my advice from Ted Cruz about how to live life and be moral.
Emily J. Fox, I love you. Thank you for your wisdom today.
Love you.
All right, let's get to our big interview with Katie Couric. You're going to enjoy this one. Take a listen. I am thrilled to today's guest. She's a legend, and that's not an overstatement, an icon. She's, of course, Katie Couric. Her #1 New York Times best-selling book, Going There. She went there, is now out in paperback. You know Katie's history, obviously, from Today Show anchor to morning to CBS TV News anchor to right now runs Katie Couric Media. One of the most important people in broadcast journalism in my lifetime. And thanks for being here, kid.
It's so great to see you, Donny. Last time I saw you, we were both at the same restaurant, and you were walking your sweet mom out, who I believe you told me is 93 years old.
It was her 93rd birthday, yes, that night at Elo's.
Oh, it was her birthday.
Yes.
I didn't realize that.
Yes.
And it was so nice to see you being so attentive and taking such good care of her. Honestly, it was really nice.
I only
So
play a
nice
schmuck on
birthday.
TV. I only play an asshole on TV. I'm not
No, come on.
What is amazing is
but
that
it was just sweet.
Thank you. But it's funny when people see me with my kids, with my daughters or my mom or in personal situations, they always go, I didn't think of you as a nice guy.
I don't think that's true.
I
think it's maybe that you give off sort of like international man of mystery vibes. You kind of give off kind of like a little bit of a player. I used to, years ago when I used to go on the Today Show, when it was you and Brian, then you and Matt, people used to say that I was flirting with you on the air. Like I would get off the air and I would just say, no, we just have this kind of natural, we like a brother and sister, we just like to bust on each other. And it's just like you and I have always had that dynamic. No matter where we see each other, it's just like it's a mutual admiration, but it's a mutual bust society also at the same time. Right. We like to tease each other. Yeah. But Donny, be honest. I mean, everybody flirted with me on the Today Show.
It's true. That is true. We'll get to that.
I'm kidding.
We're gonna get to the book because there's so much in there, and you certainly did go there, and a monster bestseller. But I just want to talk to you about the news a little bit. You were on Trevor Noah the other night talking about gun safety in a very impassioned way, and just today in the news, it's just like, what the fuck? And this will be airing a week or two from now, but they basically, it's like we're going backwards in every way. And now in New York, liberal New York, by the way, this is not Mississippi, you don't need any excuse to carry a gun in public now. And concealed gun, you don't need to prove self-defense. It's just basically the Wild West. And this is just weeks after a massacre of school children. And we see what's going on with Roe v. Wade. And we see what's going on with these hearings with just this attempted coup. And I never remember it feeling we were drifting so backwards and going so in the wrong direction in my lifetime. And I just would love your take on that.
Well, we kind of feel like we're living in the United States of Crazy Town, right?
Yeah.
I mean, here the Supreme Court says it's really not up to the states to determine who can carry a gun in public, but it is up to the states to determine who is able to get an abortion. So I feel like there's a lot of cognitive dissonance going on, sort of. You have the Supreme Court, making that decision, and then you have the Senate passing the first piece of gun legislation in 25 years, which quite frankly, I don't think goes nearly far enough.
No, it's not. It's a toe in the water. And it'll be challenged also. Now this precedent sets that up to be challenged in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and I actually picked up the phone and called my senator. I mean, I realized after I hung up, like, calling Chuck Schumer isn't really going to make that big a difference. But my friend Cheryl Crow, who you know, and who's also very passionate about sensible gun laws, not gun control, just sensible gun laws, and reducing gun violence, texted me this morning to call not only my senator, but all these other senators that were sort of on the fence. So tonight, when I'm done with this, I'm going to be making some calls to Capitol Hill. And Mark Barden, who I've become very friendly with, who lost his son, Daniel, at Sandy Hook Elementary School that terrible day, also emailed me and my husband, John, and said, please call your senator. And so it is, it is a very strange time. We're waiting for... By the time this podcast airs, I think it's a pretty safe assumption, Donnie, that Roe v. Wade will be overturned. Think about the fact that Donald Trump was able to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices. I think the average is 1 per presidency. And it does feel very disconcerting, to say the least. I was just watching the end of, I've been running around all day, so I'm going to have to get caught up tonight, the January 6th hearings. And the stuff that went on is just so hard to believe. And in some ways, I feel like we're the frogs in the slow boiling water, that we become inured to just how insane this has been. That the President of the United States said, maybe it might have been a good idea to kill the vice president. Now, even half kidding, the fact that he reportedly said that is so outrageous that, it's just, you just hope that there will be some repercussions for what happened.
The scary part, you talk about the frogs in the water, is that as frightening as all this is and was, the future is set up to be more frightening. The very things, the guardrails that were there, a few brave men, a few, profiles in courage, and, who stood up, whether it was Raffensperger or with the Arizona Speaker of the House yesterday, and there's been all these kind of unsung heroes, and these were Trumpers, hard. But now in the state legislatures, the laws have been moved and the people have been put in place where the odds of this happening again are not a possibility, it's a probability. And
I am so glad you're talking about that.
It's not, this should be leading the news every single night.
I know. And I read recently that many newspapers and networks are going to have people on the democracy beat. This is how serious it is. Yeah. But you're exactly right. These state legislatures are setting up these measures and codifying these measures that will actually give power in the hands of a very few people, and could possibly, and as you said, most likely, I guess, if the circumstances are right, overturn the will of the people. In other words, your vote won't matter at all in some of these states. And the fact that it's just happening and these people are doing it with impunity is so beyond, excuse my French, fucked up.
It's not French. It's where it's at. And a YouGov Yahoo poll recently said that 53% of Democrats and 54% of Republicans, give or take a point either way, think we will no longer be a democracy. They're actually saying it. And the part that is terrifying to me, and I'm not comparing it to Nazi Germany, but I am going to compare it to, actually I am, to any autocratic regime, is that it's like we're marching along. It's like that there's not these crazy alarm bells going off, that it's just half the people on both sides of the aisle are almost resigned to the fact that democracy is coming to an end and not taking to the streets. And it is, I don't get why there is this almost compliance at this point. And what infuriates me, and you and I know a lot of these people, that when you talk to them about it, their eyes glaze over, and all they're thinking about is their taxes, and that it's just they'd would rather vote for Trump or DeSantis, because DeSantis is actually scarier than Trump because comes better packaged and he doesn't come as obviously crazy. But there's the same fascist leanings. They wouldn't be any different if he was in office and went down, and that there is not this revolutionary undercurrent of what's going on in this country right now.
Yeah, it's pretty surprising, isn't it? And I think part of the problem is this sort of demarcation between what some people are reading, consuming, believing, and what other people are. Before the January 6th hearing started, I heard one survey that said 48% of Republicans thought Joe Biden, the DNC, and Antifa were all responsible for the insurrection on January 6th. 48% of Republicans. And then you see that, that there's still a majority of Republicans who believe that
70%.
Joe Biden
70%.
was not legitimately elected
70%
to the
of Republicans.
presidency.
70% of
And
Republicans.
I think it's proof of how potent and powerful and persuasive all those 3 P words disinformation is.
Yeah.
And the fact that there is an audience that is lapping this stuff up, that there are content creators, if you will, who are taking advantage of this to line their own pocketbooks. And it is such a monumental problem. I was a co-chair of the Aspen Commission on Disinformation, and the problem is so complicated, but it has become so deeply entrenched in our society. And it really is such a significant problem. And these platforms that claim they're basically pipes, they're platforms, not publishers, take no responsibility.
They don't have the
for
same
what's happening. And of course, in this country, we have free speech, and thank God for that. But it makes it very, very tricky to really do anything about just the mountains of disinformation that are leading so many people astray. I went on Bill Maher after the election, and after January 6th, and I said something that got me in a lot of trouble. I got a lot of hate, but I said that I thought that some of these people who believe that Donald Trump won the election need to be deprogrammed. And what I meant was that they are getting affirmation, not information. They are getting, these conspiracy theories, all kinds of things that they're buying. And it does make you wonder about the education level and the intelligence of the American people when they can be so brainwashed and bamboozled by lies and falsehoods.
Look, 50% of people get their news from Facebook, and Facebook does not have the liability that a CBS or a New York Times or any other.
Right, because of Section 230.
Until 230 changes, and it's the Wild West. You can't, I have to go, if I wanted to run an ad on NBC about laundry detergent, I would have to go through much stricter regulations to prove that it gets a color whiter 2 times faster than Brisk or Risk or whatever the other detergent, than these life and death things that we see on Facebook. And to me, one of the great villains of our time, villains, is Zuckerberg and Sandberg, because it is just there is a lot that can be done. It's not just there's, we can't control it. They were controlling it in this direction with the algorithms that play into this, and this is and it is.
And part of the problem, Donnie, is that it's almost like the man behind the curtain, like Zuckerberg is Oz in some ways, because they won't even let academics and researchers and scientists understand the inner workings of what they're doing, how they're doing. And without really knowing those things, it's very difficult to come up with concrete solutions. Yeah. But, it's funny, I was at a dinner party the other night, and someone who had spent a fair amount of time with Mark Zuckerberg just said he has always been, the one thing he cares about is crushing the competition and being the best. And he, this person said, he was stealing people's ideas in high school and taking credit for them. And I just don't think, sadly, he has any kind of North Star, or, I think he just cares. I mean, I don't know Mark Zuckerberg, but this person said he cares first and foremost about being the biggest, being the richest, and, leaving people in his rearview mirror.
Well, that's what the movie showed. The Aaron Sorkin movie, which was brilliant, one of my favorite movies of all time, actually, The Social Network. You saw a guy that was damaged and just socially damaged, and that everything he was going to do in his life was to prove he was somebody, or he was attractive to women, or whatever it was. But hey, let's talk about the book, because you and I could just go whoa about current events for hours. We could.
Oh,
and the book is a monster bestseller, New York Times #1 bestseller. And you had a little time to reflect since writing a book. What would you have done different? The book, the reviews were incredible, and you got a lot of people that were like, "You go, girl! You went there, you did it, you went." And then a lot of people, "Oh, you weren't fair to this one, you weren't fair to that one, and why did you have to do it?" And I'm just curious, reflection now. It's been a little time since the book has been out. Thoughts on now, not just writing the book, on a post-mortem on the book itself.
Yeah, I still love the book. It's so nice to be able to write a book and feel so much pride.
As well you should.
And feel like, you did a really good job of being transparent, talking about your experiences in a human and honest way. I think what happened with some of the early criticism, or people saying, "Why did you do that?" I think people who read the book in its totality, who read sort of the narrative or how I told the story. But
that's not the way a book is sold. What's sold is they lift out the 14 controversial sentences.
And taken alone by themselves, it might have seemed like unkind. But if in the context of what I wrote, I don't think I was really. I was unkind to a couple of people. Like I wasn't very kind to Jeff Fager at 60 Minutes. Mm-hmm. He was not supportive, and I think, quite frankly, undermined me when I got to CBS. I think I was pretty measured about Matt. I think I showed him as a full person. Yeah. His strength and his flaws and my disappointment, and also the fact that he came up in a culture where the rules were very different.
Yes, they were.
And behavior was so different, Donnie. And, I said that I think I was most critical of myself. Yeah. I owned up to mistakes and blind spots. I said, I sometimes was territorial about my job when people walked around saying they were going to replace me. It didn't bring out my generous side, and you and everybody
else in the business, by the way. Okay.
Yeah, and all these people are like, "Oh, she doesn't support women," which is not further. It could not be further from the truth. But I said, yeah, sometimes I got insecure and protective of my turf, and I, as you said, I would, bet dollars to donuts that. And
every man is the same way.
Exactly.
You and I could tell the specific stories about various male anchors and their predecessors and their followers.
Exactly. So, and I think there was a kerfuffle that I said, that Martha Stewart didn't have much of a sense of humor.
She laughed
And
about it after the fact, though. She went
yeah,
on and was like,
and actually early on she was just took her work very seriously, and I later said I'm so glad, she has this fun relationship with Snoop Dogg, and it's so fun to see Martha now laughing at herself, so
Yeah.
I think that all these little things, I think that it's sort of I think controversy laced with a soupçon of misogyny really sells, Donnie.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of that was stuff that was taken out of context. I think the one thing, we live in a media world that is not capable of nuance, right? I mean, let's just be honest. The way the media works today. And so I think that some of the things I think I could have been a little more careful about. For example, I wrote about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I wanted to write
You protected her.
about.
I got it.
Yeah, well, I did and I didn't. I ran a 2-minute clip of her interview where she was critical of Colin Kaepernick, and she said he was disgusting and she disrespectful, and and then she said a couple of things about he's better off than where he came from. It just seemed odd, and it just didn't seem necessarily. I just thought it could be misinterpreted.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, oh, I'm not sure how that sounds, and so I gave it a ton of thought. I talked to David Brooks, I talked to David Weston. Her office called and said she misunderstood, and I was a bit of a conundrum, and I said that I took the part that I found that I thought could be really offensive out, and I think. And I, as I posit in the book, would I have done the same for Clarence Thomas? And it was because I had
No, you wouldn't do it, but that's okay. But by the way, you're a human, and you're writing about humans that you have perspective on, that you have feelings for. So nobody says a book has to be void of a person's feelings about other, like that just doesn't. Of course, you would be different about Clarence Thomas than you would about Ruth. And is that wrong? I don't think so.
Well, I think in retrospect, I probably should have run the whole thing, but I wanted to show, and I think some people just honestly aren't quite sophisticated to understand some of the things I wrote about, or they just, I can't even think of the word, Donnie, but when you kind of minimize things and you boil them down.
Oversimplification.
No, or yeah, they were so reductive
Right.
about some of the more complex points I was making, that I think it got twisted. But I also wanted to show that journalists make these kind of editorial judgment calls all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes you do. I think it's the sign of a good journalist who says, maybe that wasn't the right decision. I haven't made many of those, but this was a case where I did. And I think transparency and honesty is a really great exercise for all journalists, because let's face it, we're not perfect and we don't get it right 100% of the time. And that's why I wanted to include that story. And I remember someone said, why did you talk about that? And I said, why wouldn't I?
Yeah. You talked about everything in the book. The Sarah Palin part. Do you take me inside your head as you're interviewing her and as she's talking about how she doesn't read and all the things? Were you, as you're sitting there, are you saying to yourself, holy fuck, this could really change your life? Like when you're in the moment? No.
I really wasn't, Donnie, because I thought, well, first of all, her speech pattern is so sort of different. It's kind of got that Marge Gunderson from Fargo quality. No, really,
Right.
And her intonation and kind of her expressions. And I remember thinking, this will be really interesting. I what I thought is it would reinforce the views of people who did not think she was ready for prime time, but that people who really liked her would dismiss the interview. And I think what I didn't expect is there was this broad swath of undecided voters who, maybe prefer John McCain to Barack Obama or thought John McCain had more experience or whatever it was. But I think what happened is in that interview, it made people question John McCain's judgment in picking someone like this who would be a heartbeat away from the presidency for a man who would have been, I believe, the oldest president ever elected at the time, and someone who had had cancer 4 times. So, I think that it made people say, wait a second, I'm not sure I'd feel comfortable with her as vice president and potentially as president. So, and that was at CBS where I was honestly, Donnie, as you know in the book, kind of feeling so beleaguered and discouraged. I didn't want to think, wow, that was a really important, impactful interview. I was just hoping I did a good job and that it was illuminating to voters. But I wasn't like licking my chops and saying, hot dog, this is the one.
Yeah. Do the CBS experience, it always baffles me in business, and particularly everybody always thinks the television business is a creative, progressive business, where in fact it's so not in so many instances. Here they go out and they hire you as an agent of change to make that, and yet you show up, and you talk about this in the book a lot, and it's just basically you're just running up against walls everywhere you go. And the mentality, the management mentality in so many areas of our industry, it always baffles me. Is that how they go after the shiny thing, and they go, okay, this is going to be great, and we're doing this for these reasons, and then the capability is just not there.
Well, I think what was interesting, I mean, John, my husband, has said that many times to me as well, because he's a business guy.
Yeah.
And in terms of, return on your investment, like, why the hell would they sign you to a 5-year contract, match your salary at NBC,
pay you a shitload of money,
and yet sort of not be more supportive? And I think it really had to do with the fact that Les Moonves himself was really the one who was the agent of change, who went after the bright, shiny object.
And the people in charge hate that because they don't want to be told.
And I think he never had, I don't think, the full respect of the news organization, the news side of CBS. I think they resented him, and I think they felt like I was being forced on them.
Yeah.
And I think that he was weak. He never said, "Hey, get off the train," or get on the train, or get off at the station and get another job. So I was kind of in this limbo where Les had brought me in, but some of the other people who were in positions of power were decided they didn't want me there. So it was a very strange experience for me, and so much of it, I think, was about the DNA of the organization. And organizations need strong leaders. Yeah. And I like Sean McManus very much. I think he's a really nice guy. But he was a sports guy, Donnie.
Yeah.
And Les put him in charge of news. He wasn't Roone Arledge.
No.
And he didn't, I think, have the strength to say, hey, guess what, Jeff Fager, you're going to work with Katie. She's a really important part of our network. She's not the most important, but she's an important person. And you need to make sure we brought her here telling her she could do 60 Minutes pieces. And you cannot be an obstructionist. You've got to, make this work. But I don't think anyone had the balls to do that. No. And so I think the alchemy of the place was just sort of not receptive to me. And I, Donnie, for so long, I was just kicking myself. And why didn't I do more due diligence? Why didn't I get it, certain things written in my contract? Why didn't I meet with Jeff Fager and suck up to him or whatever he needed, or kiss his ring? I'm not very good at that, Donnie, as you know. No. And, but I think I made the best decision with the information I had at the time, but I just feel
you had to do it. You had, I mean, you had a 15-year run. It was, you were breaking, glass ceilings or whatever the term is that you were doing. I mean, you had to do it, and there was I don't think there was a due diligence you could do at that point that would see that coming. To be honest with you, in hindsight,
I guess, but I think, but what, hindsight is 20/20.
Yeah.
I'm like, coulda, woulda, shoulda. But having said all that, as difficult as it was, and I tell that funny scene in the book where my daughters and I are eating dinner, and I'm like being attacked internally, externally. Like I have my own version of Single and Fabulous, remember, with the
Right.
Carrie
Right,
Bradshaw,
right, 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 right,
Bradshaw
right.
question mark, and she's hung over with a cigarette hanging out of her mouth, and mine was kind of a similar scenario. And I started crying at the dinner table with my daughters, and I said, I'm sorry, I'm just having a really hard time. And Carrie, who was 10 at the time, says, Mom, remember what Samantha said in Sex and the City? If I listened to what every bitch in New York said about me,
Yeah.
I'd never leave the house.
I feel the same way.
And I was like, that is so wrong on so many levels. First, that she's quoting Samantha when she's in fifth grade.
Yes. Yeah.
Hopefully, well, I'm just glad it wasn't the Funky Spunk episode.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I'm always torn about this because, now if you call out, Donald Trump for lying, people who are supportive of him think you're biased when actually you're just telling the truth.
There's no two sides. There's no,
right.
Sometimes there isn't another side. I mean, there's just
Exactly.
facts. I mean, that's it.
Exactly.
Facts are very inconvenient little things, I mean,
Exactly. But having said that, I think that, CNN, which I worked at before it even went on the air. I was one of the first employees of CNN in Washington.
I didn't know that until
yeah,
your book, right?
And I think that, quite frankly, during those years, the commentary and the eye rolling and the sighing and it just became a little much. And I would like to respect viewers enough to give them the facts, give them analysis, and let them
Well,
intelligently
let me ask you a
come
question.
to their own
Let me ask you a question
conclusion.
as somebody who did this for their entire life and a very smart business person. Chris Licht, who's a friend of mine, also is running it, but Zaslav, there's kind of a dictate now that we're going to go more to straight news. We're not going to over. Is the toothpaste out of the tube? Is there a market for that anymore? Whereas
I was going to say, I think that's the $1 million question,
Yeah.
Donnie.
Yeah.
Is straight news is a news network that doesn't operate on engagement through enragement, that's not kind of feeding our visceral need, our primal need to, just be furious at the other side. Is there a market for that?
I think there was. I think once you now have given people the ability to have bespoke news, they still think they're getting news, but they're getting it in the way that they want it. So even if I don't go as far as enragement, and I just say, I can tune on the news and I'm going to kind of be satiated in my, in my preconceived notions that I'm smart and this is the way I feel, that I don't know how you go back to that other thing. I mean, there's going to be some
BBC, like a more BBC model,
I think
or
it's
a more PBS model.
I think it's noble, and look, Zaslav is a really smart guy, and so is Chris, and I think there's not a holding company that doesn't want to do that. And look, if Comcast had their way, they would not be in the business they're in. They're kind of stuck there now. They can't move off of it. It's just they don't want to be. They have to do business with the government. They have to, and so clearly you're Zaslav. You don't want the headaches of swaying one way or the other. You would, I think if they had their way, they'd probably get rid of CNN. It's just headaches for them at this point. It's such a small.
Well, they also don't want to alienate 50% of the country.
That's it.
And I think what's happened is television viewership has gone down. People have had to figure out ways to hold on to a smaller and smaller piece of the pie. And you do that by getting rabidly loyal viewers who come to you to hear, honestly, a little bit what they want to hear, to your point. I remember I got a Walter Cronkite Award, and I talked about, this was probably in, 2006, talked about people being attracted to things that that confirm their pre-existing biases, that basically they're like in one of those ovens. What are those ovens where the heat goes all the way around you? What is that called?
Right.
Convection oven. And it's sort of like that's giving them, fueling them. And so I think that's the real question. Is there a way to make down the line news? And you can't really be down the line when Donald Trump is spreading,
That's the problem.
lies.
So it's no, and the answer is no. I don't think you can.
I think the question is, in a post-Trump world, will you be able to do this? If, in fact, and who knows, that's a big if, the Republican Party becomes less extreme. And if Ron DeSantis is the nominee, that's, and I read already that Rupert Murdoch is kind of distancing himself from Trump.
No,
and it's like, they're like the Ron DeSantis network now, because
they realize
isn't
that's
that
interesting?
interesting?
Because basically that's a winning formula. Trump, I also think, look, Murdoch has love him or hate him, and he runs an evil empire in a lot of ways.
I was going to say I would pick the latter.
Yeah, the one thing he does have is he has a sense of his audience, and I think when if Trump resurfaces in a meaningful way, his act is just old. He doesn't have any new hits. It's just it's really interesting when he surfaces now. Trumpism is a different thing than Trump right now. And when he surfaces, he doesn't have the same power. It seems like a tired act, a losing act. And I think that even in the latest straw polls the polls that came out of New Hampshire, that DeSantis is beating him. So I actually think Trump's days are over. I think everybody says he's unbeatable. I don't agree with that at all. And I think DeSantis, you're seeing it. But the scary part is that Trumpism is not over, and that
is a very, as Tucker Carlson says to every guest, that's a really perceptive point.
Speaking of Tucker Carlson, I always wonder about this, is because talk about evil and talk about the hate mongering. Do you believe, in the case of a Tucker Carlson and like-minded folks like him, that they genuinely believe everything they're saying, or it's a form of performance art where they're so taken with the whiff, the smell of the musk of their success, that very much that Trump was playing to an audience and he would get the visceral feedback and that would feed back. And I wonder with the Tucker Carlsons of the world, because I've met Sean Hannity a bunch of times, and you meet him and you go, okay, seems like a nice enough guy. And then you just see this and you go, can they fucking believe this? And the answer is, I think it is performance art. I think a lot of it is, which makes it even more heinous in another way.
Look at Sean Hannity's texts.
Yeah, we know.
On January 6th. Yeah. Look what Laura Ingraham was writing on January 6th, and then listen to what they say night after night after night.
Yeah.
I don't know Tucker really. I don't know Laura Ingraham really, but so I can't say what their true beliefs are, but you'd have to think that they get a lot of positive feedback for what they're spewing night after night. The kind of, I don't know, it's just such an undercurrent of smugness and nastiness. And, but maybe they look at liberal commentators and they feel the same way.
There is a difference, even though both sides are skewed. It's not, you just hit on it, it's not done. If you watch Fox, and everybody, you have to watch Fox because you can't intelligently kind of decipher what's going on in the world. It is so nasty. Forget skewed. There's a guy on at 11 o'clock now, Greg Gutfeld or Gutfried, whatever his name is, that just like literally makes fun of people's being fat. And I mean, it just, there is a smug nastiness to it. That you don't get on the left. The left is incredibly skewed, and you can watch MSNBC at prime time, and I sometimes want to pull my hair out and go, guys, what planet are you on? You know what I mean? There's some of this woke bullshit that's going on, particularly in prime time, but it doesn't have the nastiness. It doesn't have the smug, arrogant, that the right has. You know what I mean? I just want to shift for a second, just a little bit about early in your career. I know we'll go bouncing back and forth. Why do you think, and you were just, when you track your early part of your career, and then you were an NBC News correspondent, and then all of a sudden you're subbing on the Today Show. Like you were just this, you were there a year or two before. You're like, why do you think, what happened in the gods of broadcasting that touched your shoulder and said, she's going to be the next one? What do you think was the thing that, and part of it is serendipitous, of course, but it's, I'm just curious now, because the older we get, we're more able to reflect on what really happened in our lives. And then so I was always curious about how that, like, in other words, especially when I see old pictures of you in the BMW ad, and you a little cute, perky Katie Couric. You were 12 years old doing what you were doing. How
I was 32.
Okay, you were 12. In our years, it's 12. Okay. How the fuck did that happen?
I think it was a confluence of events. I think part of it was being at the right place at the right time. And that's not taking anything away from the
from
fact
your
that I
skill and
think
your
I
hard
have
work and
some,
your talent. Of course.
that
of
I
course.
work really hard. I mean,
Any successful person can recognize some good fortune, or otherwise
know,
you're clueless.
So I think there was that. I think the fact that Tim Russert kind of plucked me out of local news obscurity and gave me a shot at the Pentagon. I think he saw something in me, and I think if Tim gave you his blessing, that carried a lot of weight at the network. I think people were respected, obviously loved and respected Tim, and thought apparently he had decent taste and talent. And then I think it was honestly, and I write about this in the book, and in a way that's not really critical of Deborah Norville at all. It's more critical of the executives that made the decision to push Jane Pauley out at 39.
I don't think you were critical at all, Deborah Norville. I thought you were very kind to her.
That was the rap, because I said she was sort of so perfect that viewers recoiled because she was so beautiful. Like that was my criticism.
No, and as everybody knows, the person in that morning chair has got to be your next door neighbor, that there's no chance they're going to steal your husband and it's your best friend.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I mean, that's it,
Yeah. So anyway, but I think that because of what had happened before I arrived on the scene, that Jane had been pushed out, that Deborah, who is very talented, absolutely breathtakingly beautiful, and the fact that viewers felt that they had been betrayed, that they didn't it's like Deborah was seen by some people as being kind of a homewrecker. And I think I benefited from that really poorly executed transition. Yeah. And as a result, I was so different than honestly a lot of women on television at the time. Yeah. I was, I just sort of, looked like a normal person.
You were, and you had this gee whiz.
I wasn't particularly.
You had a gee whiz thing. This is fun to be here. You know what I mean? It was like people were able to. I analyzed. People were able to participate in your growth into the role. You know what I mean? It was like somebody like them was put in there, and you got to play TV, and you got to play anchor.
Yeah, and I think I was, I think helped usher in an era of authenticity where it was a little less formal. People were, goofing around or making mistakes and laughing about it. I think the fact that I didn't take myself uber seriously, and that I was able to, give it back to Bryant when he got all puffy.
Well, he gets as well he does, right?
And sort of, full of himself. And I think people appreciated that as well. I'd roll my eyes or slap him or, say, give me a break or, and I think, I remember, I think I wrote in the book about how I pretend to know all this stuff about sports, and I was just totally goofing because I knew nothing about sports really at the time. And I think being able to be, to show my weaknesses or to show areas I wasn't particularly interested in, to not be, breathtakingly beautiful in any way, shape, or form. I think that people related to me. As
I remember
you said,
Michael J. Fox, who's a friend of both of ours, said to me before I had my first TV gig, and I said, any advice? He goes, just be yourself. Of course, they'll know the difference. You know what I mean? Let them like you, let them not like you, but they're going to know the difference if you're not yourself. So just be yourself. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what John Chancellor, he told me, always corrected my name, how I pronounced his name. John Chancellor wrote me a note and said, TV is the world's best bullshit detector. Yeah. So just be yourself.
Speaking of yourself, you've been very generous with your time. My final question.
Oh no, I love it's so fun talking to you, Donny.
I always love talking to you, and you're such a good soul, and I always watch you in public as people bother you, and you're just always so gracious to everybody, and it's nice to see.
Well, I'm sure you are too. I mean, the worst thing to me would be if someone said, I always liked that Katie Couric, and then I met her
Yeah.
on the street, and she just wasn't that nice. John gets kind of annoyed because he's like, Couric, come up with an exit question. Because, they'll tell me their whole life
No, but I
story.
agree. And they always, what they'll do is they'll go, you probably don't remember this, but you and I were at the same part. because
Oh,
they'll
do you
recognize
remember?
somebody who's recognizable. Today, I was getting my haircut, and the woman comes over and just starts telling me the nicest things. And her husband's go, oh, come on, let's leave him alone. I'm like, no, more. This is like so nice. It's just, these are what we call very high class problems, but.
What I was going to say is, I don't know, I wrote about this too, but.
Well, you you wrote about at the beginning how you loved walking into a restaurant and
Yeah,
you just,
well, it was nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got a lot of perks, and there are obviously a lot of wonderful things about being a public person. But there's a very funny scene in this movie, Soap Dish, where Sally Fields is a washed-up soap opera actress, and she would go to the mall in Paramus just so she could
get fed,
recognized.
Yeah. All right, so final question, because the whole premise of this podcast is that everybody and everything is a brand today. Every corporation, every company.
Oh yeah,
every
we
person.
have to talk about our company.
What I want to talk about, first of all, your company, but also what is the Katie Couric brand?
I don't know. You tell me, Donnie. You're the brand expert. What do you think is the Katie Couric brand?
I think that we touched on it a few minutes ago. I think the Katie Couric brand is authentic, really smart person next door that's going to give it to you straight and make it go down in a likable way.
Okay, that does it for me. That's why you do what you do, Donnie, and I do what I do.
And you danced around it when we were talking about it, but that's kind of what you were, and that you're somebody that you can laugh with and make fun of yourself, and then if it's time to say oh my God, these planes are going into those buildings over there, that you can do it in a way that is going to deliver it straight, but I feel like somebody sitting up there is not doing it. You know what I mean? Somebody who's right next to me is doing it. And I think that's
would
the essence of the brand.
I would add, Donnie, that I hope people would see me as someone who is curious and open-hearted.
Yeah.
That somebody who tries to understand. It's hard in this day and age, as we talked at the beginning of our conversation, because there's such a divide and there's so many sort of untruths that are being perpetuated. So it's sometimes hard to reason with people and to hear their perspective when their perspective is based on untruths and disinformation and ignorance, so that's really hard, I think, to be generous in those circumstances. But I think we all need to get to a place, and I don't know the solution to this, where we can have a debate. We can talk to people who disagree with us about certain things, that we can say, well,
there's a simple formula. You don't start out with somebody and say, you voted for Trump, you're such an asshole. You start out with, I get why you voted for him the first time, and you took a flyer, but will you give me this? And you can't basically say to somebody, you're an asshole, and expect a dialogue. It just doesn't work that way, And
I think
that's the simple formula.
And I think that's what's happening increasingly on social media. The two extremes on either side are dominating the discussion on social media, and people in the middle who actually would like to be willing to have a conversation, I think you're penalized for that. And that's part of the problem. But, I think one of the reasons John and I started this media company.
Yeah, tell me what's going on with the media company.
Well, a couple years ago, I love to work. I love to talk to people. I love to tell stories. I like to enlighten people if I can through my own journey of learning and education. And so he said, why don't we start a media company? I mean, there's never been a better time for disruption. Television viewership is, as you know, going down, down. Sure. People are getting their news and information on another rectangular, much smaller screen that fits in the palm of their hands. And you can have the freedom to do and to focus your lens on the things you care about. So we started a newsletter I'm doing a podcast. We're working with purpose-driven brands,
Yeah.
big global brands like we've worked with Walmart. We just signed a deal with Google. We're working with Ally Financial. Procter and Gamble was our first partnership with Mark Richard, who's become a really good friend. Many of these
He's a good man.
companies,
He's a good man.
as
Yeah.
faith in institutions like financial institutions, the government, certainly at the federal and now at the state level,
Yeah.
the media has declined. A lot of people are looking to companies and their employers to try to tackle some of these intractable issues that we just don't seem to be making any progress on. So we're helping these brands, and it's not branded content, it's brand supported
Yes,
content.
yes.
We're telling stories about, like I work with Hologic about the importance of 3D mammograms and getting ultrasound if you have fibrocystic breasts. I'm sure this is fascinating to you, but these are life-saving messages and information for people. And so we're talking about things like gender equality. We're talking about racial justice issues. We're talking about disrupting the status quo, female entrepreneurs, all kinds of things scientific advancements, all kinds of things that I am really, really interested in. But our business model is based on these partnerships
Yeah.
with companies that care about the same things that we care about, who share our values. And we've got 35 employees now.
Wow.
And working with a lot of young
Wow.
journalists.
Wow. Wow.
And we've got people who are handling accounts. We're just like,
It's a real
we're doing
media
well.
company.
And yeah. And
Oh, I
John
love it.
is the CEO because
Fucking Molnar, man. Who knew, right?
yeah. No, and he's so great because he's a very smart businessman and he's very commercial.
Yeah.
And it gives me the freedom.
It's a good balance. Yeah. It's an
gives
actual
me the
balance
freedom
to
to
be the
do
editor. Yeah.
a 6-part podcast
Yeah.
on Roe v. Wade and travel to Missouri and
Yeah.
Illinois
Yeah.
and to go places and do things. And I think just the democratization of the media landscape has had a lot of sort of negative impacts in a way. But what it's done, Donnie, is you really don't need a big network infrastructure.
No, you don't. Yeah, it's
like
you're a perfect example of it.
I talked to Adam Kinzinger, last
Yeah.
week about January 6th. I talked to Neil Katyal, the former acting
Sure, of
Solicitor
course.
General, about Roe v. Wade. I can get on the phone with these
Yeah.
folks. Michael McFaul talked to me, three or four times about Ukraine, the former ambassador to Russia.
Look,
So,
I'm doing it on this podcast. I mean, I just spoke to Eric Holder last week. I mean, like it's
Right.
it's you really. You have that, and you don't need that infrastructure, and particularly if, in your case, because of your name, you can pretty much talk to anybody you want, and you
Which
don't
is
have to go through.
great.
And it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
and I can talk, Donnie, and I don't know if you found this satisfying, but I don't have someone counting me down after
No.
3.5 minutes. And these, we live in very complicated times,
And sometimes stories
these
need to be told. Yes,
conversations,
they need to have.
they need to. Things need to be explored and discussed. I think what the problem is, though, now there is so much content out there.
Well, you
So
have to be
many,
authentic.
and-
You have to be authentic, and that's the other part of your brand. I think I mentioned the thing is that everything you described you're doing is authentic to you, and
Yeah.
that's what makes it work. And that's the advice I would give to anybody in any media venture in this very overcluttered media landscape is you just have to be authentic, and I think that then drives everything else.
And I also think, we have a newsletter, Wake Up Call, that's out, 6 days a week. We've got a great staff of really talented writers. We've got like 5 or 6 writers working on Wake Up Call. And, and I can say, hey, let's do a piece on Title IX. It's the 50th anniversary this month. And how are we going to do it? And, and then we can iterate content to fit different platforms and reuse it and reimagine it for YouTube versus a text interview, say, in the newsletter on the website. We just redesigned our website.
KatieCouricMedia.com?
Yeah, KatieCouric.com.
KatieCouric.com.
Yeah, and you know what's really interesting? I think we have to accept everybody. When I was on the Today Show, there were 3 morning shows, Donnie. There was no iPhones.
No.
They came along in 2007. So for the 15 years I did the Today Show, if you wanted to hear the news, you
In the
picked up the
morning, that's
paper
it.
on your front steps.
Oh, you turned on the
turned
Today
on
Show.
the
Yeah.
radio to,
That's it.
get your local station or NPR.
We forget the smartphone is only 15 years old. It's just it's fucking
or
crazy.
you turn the Today, or you turn on morning news.
Yeah.
And now it's just so fragmented. And I often say that mass media is now an oxymoron.
Yes, there
and
is
you
no such
have
thing.
to realize that.
And even
you
the mass
may-
media is not mass anymore. I mean, it's
No,
such
that's
a
what I
small
mean.
it's just
Yeah.
there is
Well,
no
that's
such
what
thing.
I meant, Dodo. Mass media
I'm a
is
little
an
slow.
oxymoron.
I'm a little slow. Okay.
But anyway,
So-
but what I was going to say is, but I think I think it's really about building a community and having an engaged community.
Yes.
And that to me gives me so much pleasure and gives me a sense of fulfillment that I'm helping people understand this complicated world, that I'm helping them figure out, if you want sensible gun laws, this is what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm personalizing people who are lost in tragedies, so it has an emotional impact on the people who are watching and reading about them. And, I'm so liberated from a creative point of
It's
view.
amazing. I
You know?
feel it. I feel it. Katie Couric, you are very kind. The book in paperback, the #1 New York Times bestseller, going there. Katie Couric Media, all kinds of exciting stuff going on. You are still going strong. And my final confession, yes, in the 90s when I did the Today Show, I was flirting with you. Katie Couric, thank
I
you, my
knew
love.
it, Donnie.
Thank you, my love. I'll see you soon.
Okay, see ya. Bye.
Thanks for listening to On Brand. We love when you listen, and remember to rate, review, and subscribe anywhere you get podcasts, Spotify, Apple, anyplace else. Rate, review, and or subscribe, and also watch our videos on YouTube. And you can also subscribe there and leave your comments. Hope you enjoyed my interview with Katie Couric. I know I did. And once again, have a safe week. We'll see you, and we'll listen to you, and we'll hear you next week on Brand. Stay well. Everybody, thanks for watching. If you like it, hit that subscribe button. And we love having you here watching On Brand. And just don't miss any future episodes. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.